We've been sailing in the tropics for the last 10 years and would say the biggest hazard to cruising is the weather. Tropical storms, squalls and unpredictable winds can make navigation challenging. North of the equator, the weather can be divided into three main periods: the northeast monsoon, the southwest monsoon and the transitional period, when winds can be either erratic or non-existent. But as we approached the equator, we were discovering that navigating the unforgiving northern coastline of Sulawesi during the transitional period did not mean an easy journey.
Another beautiful morning, just gone 7, and we had a little lie-in, although we did go to bed quite late last night, I think probably from adrenaline. Anyway, it's time to push on, and we've got a 35-mile hop today, so a little bit shorter than yesterday, and hopefully more of a straight run as well. No promontories or capes to get around. Of course, we didn't get a chance to see Leok, which is a bit of a shame, but we've said that we'll probably stop and rest at the next anchorage for a little bit. And nothing else to report except lots of these spider boats. They're all tied up. You can see their mooring buoys all dotted around the place. This is where they sleep for the night, from that protection from that swell. I'll give you one guess as to which way the wind's coming from, but we won't talk about that. We'll just make sure that we can motor for at least, reaching at least 4 knots would be nice. As we leave, it's up to 5.5 right now, but that's because we're outside of the current. But yeah, the one thing is this mosque. They have an incredible mosque here. It's painted yellow with green trim, and it was lit up at night, and it looks rather majestic. Really quite smart. Well, it'd be rude not to, eh? We literally have just left the anchorage and got a nice breeze of, what have we got? It's actually only 6 knots. The wind's in the right direction for the Kraken. And we thought we've got to get some sailing in, even if it is only at the moment 3.5 knots. Hopefully that'll pick up to 4. We've got all of the fishing boats all on our starboard side, I hope. I think there's one on our port side. So we've got a nice clear run, and at the moment no sign of any squalls. That happens later on.
Oh, today is starting off well. I'm going to take the bits of joy when I can grab them. We're making 4 knots. We've got the Kraken out, no engine on. And the great thing with the Kraken is it's so big it takes up all this room over here, and it means we're sitting in the shade. So we're not burning to a crisp either. Yeah, good start to the day. It's now, what is the time? 7:45, so just a few more hours to go.
Things change quickly in this neck of the woods. So we lost that wind earlier, so we had to put the Kraken away, sadly. Motoring for a bit, and it seems as if we do have a countercurrent, but it is in correlation to the tide. So we were just on the last of the rising tide when we had the Kraken out, and then as the wind died, the tide also turned and our speed dropped a little. Happy to say it's picked up, and now the wind has come round across the front and is now coming from the sort of the east-northeast, I suppose, which means we can get the Yankee out there. But there's only 5 knots of wind, so just getting it out sort of stabilises the boat and gives us about half a knot as well, I suppose. And surprisingly, I've seen someone on AIS. It's probably a commercial ship, but don't often see that. It's a novelty. It's the usual midday build-up of clouds, as I mentioned the other day. This is really just from the heat from the landmass, creating this precipitation, and It seems to happen every day, so it's not like we're not used to it, but it always seems to coincide with when we're coming round a headland and going into our anchorage, because we've got a few more miles to go before, well, you can see the tip just just there. So we're going to go around down inside there, and it gets very shallow, usual story. And it will probably be done in a whiteout as well. The other thing to see whether we do it at 1 knot. I don't think it's going to be as bad as yesterday. Well, unfortunately I've had to put the sails away now, but this is what I dream of. This is what turned me onto sailing in the first place back in 2012, was it, I think, when I crossed the Atlantic. It wasn't 2012, was it? It was 2002. Sorry, I'm 10 years behind. Jesus. 20 years ago. Was it really 20 years ago that I crossed the Atlantic? And you had vistas like this, which is basically just blue, 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 nothingness. Okay, when we did the Atlantic, we had the Atlantic swell, so it was a bit like this. But it's the same thing. It's just looking out and just seeing absolute nothing except sea and sky. There's something about that I find very special, and that is why I do this. Even if we're motoring, I'm just making the most of this situation. But it's just gorgeous. I can just stand and just look out here all day. Pretty dramatic, eh? It's been like this every day, just mountain after rolling mountain. Beautiful scenery, and it's exactly 2 o'clock in the afternoon, and like clockwork we're getting this precipitation that's building. We'll probably get a bit wet as we come in here, but it's just breathtaking, isn't it? And it's like just this very slow moving, slow TV show. It's just this gorgeous scenery. Oh, if only we could spend 6 months here just cruising down this coast, wouldn't it be wonderful? Wouldn't it be great to anchor just here, eh? Look at this. Picture postcard and all that. But we're in 25 metres. You can see how close we are to the shore. And in my mind, that's never a good sign. It means that the seabed is doing that. So you might be able to drop on some rocks. But for a safe night's sleep, I think we're just going to head over to the other side of the bay where we know there's sand and mud. But just gorgeous, isn't it? In the V of a valley, storm clouds rolling in over those mountains there, and those desolate desert islands over there with the clear waters. You couldn't get much more dramatic than this, could you?
Like clockwork, the daily afternoon squall came in. There are 3 ingredients needed for these squalls to develop: moisture, an unstable atmosphere, and a trigger. The lush mountainscapes across Sulawesi, combined with the warm ocean currents, provide the moisture. Squalls are common around bodies of water because the air moving over water can change quickly in behaviour. It rises rapidly, moving from the warm surface into the cooler sky. This trigger creates cumulonimbus clouds, holding precipitation and eventually lightning. Because they happen so quickly, they're difficult to forecast, but we were getting used to them coming in around 1 o'clock from the southwest to west. Providing we knew this, we could be prepared, and we all know preparation is key. Well, that was the beautiful island of Palele and the surrounding area. Just lovely. The anchorages along here in northern Sulawesi are beautiful. We only stayed for a night because we do want to push on to Manado. We've got somewhat of a deadline. We need to be in Bitung to renew our visa, but not until the end of the month. But before we get there, there's a few things we want to do on the northern eastern end of Sulawesi.
I was just looking through the binoculars this morning at the village that we're anchored closest to, and it really does look quite run down. Lots of rusty corrugated tin roofs on old shacks. I mean, we call them shacks. It's a bit of an insult, really. Not much of a beach. There's a bit of a breakwater with old fishing nets strewn across them, and certainly seems to be not quite as prosperous as maybe the areas around Toli Toli. I mean, that said, when we actually came in through the channel up there yesterday afternoon, I was saying to Liz how I could see some pretty big houses. The biggest houses are the bird houses. That's where they grow and sell the birds' nests. They're pretty ubiquitous around here. We see them everywhere. And so I guess the people with the bigger houses probably own those birds' nests. For the rest of the people, it's back to growing cloves, and there seem to be other crops growing up on the hills as well, landscaped into the mountains. Couldn't quite tell what they were through the binoculars.
More agriculture than in previous anchorages. They're patchworks of around the hill of what looks like fields and things, and lots of crops growing. Maybe in the area, other places it was mainly trees, with cloves being the number one thing they seem to be growing here. Agriculture is a large part of Sulawesi's economy. Cacao, sugar and rice form the bulk of southern Sulawesi's farming, where the land is flatter. In the highest altitudes you'll find Sulawesi coffee, but here, in the hilly north, they produce tree crops like those we saw in Toli Toli: cloves, nutmeg and coconut. We identified coconut palm plantations all the way along this coastline. In fact, Indonesia is the number one coconut producing country in the world, and North Sulawesi is the biggest exporter of crude coconut oil in Indonesia, as we can attest to by the pervading smell of coconut processing in almost every anchorage. Plots for these crops are often family run, so the trees on one of these mountainsides we're looking at are likely to be owned by numerous families.
The other thing that was curious was to work out how people get around here. I mean, look at this, it's just mountain after mountain, and they're very sheer. Well, Liz was looking at the charts yesterday, or the map in fact, and there is an interstate highway, I can't remember the name of it, but that actually runs around the coast, which makes sense really, because it's going to be a lot easier to build infrastructure to carry traffic along the sea level, at coastal level, rather than up over these very steep mountains. But it's a long commute back to Toli Toli, which is still only probably 100 miles away in that direction. It's probably just as quick to go by boat as it is by car. Not sure what that is, possibly some kind of bait ball. But the terns are getting very excited, and hopefully any minute now Liz should catch something on the end of her line. More fish action over my shoulder there. What you can see is the boiling water and lots of terns getting very excited, but above them is a sea eagle who's circling around and very slowly coming down and swooping in to catch fish. Behind the camera over there is a big ass storm, and it's actually on Rainviewer, which is the app that we use that uses the weather radar stations around the world to show you real-time build-up of precipitation. And funny enough, for half of this journey across the top of Sulawesi, there is a blind spot, and there are no radar stations covering the northwest corner of Sulawesi. We have now moved back into a region that is covered, and I've just checked on our sketchy connection, and sure enough it is showing a little blob there. It reckons it's moving south, which means it's moving across the front of us that way. So I'm hoping that that blows off ahead of us, but it's always good to be prepared, isn't it? Oh, and I forgot to mention that we have been moving on a rising tide. It's going to turn any minute now, and we've actually been making really good progress, better than we have done for the whole journey across the top here. But strangely enough, the next tide is an odd one because it's a falling tide and it falls for 12 hours, not the usual 6 hours. So not sure what's going on there. Very strange, but I'm hoping it doesn't impede our progress too much.
We keep catching barracuda and throwing them back, and I said to you last time, I'm going to keep the next barracuda and try cooking it in a way that's been suggested to us by one of our followers. So that was the idea. Saw it coming in, got it on board, but it was so big. I don't think you should eat them when they're that big because they've got possibly all kinds of parasites and things in them. They might be carrying ciguatera, you never know. Much too big to kill and eat. In fact, it was so big it had its own baby remora on it, which I was able to throw back. So yeah, that was a nice fight. It came right out of the water. Really tugged to begin with, and then bringing it in was quite easy.
Gaffing it was difficult.
You had a problem gaffing it, but I think I've worked out the best way to do it now, which is basically I'll walk backwards, take the rod out of the holder when we get closer, and then I can bring it in much easier for you to reach. I think that's the way. So this is all just a little bit of history repeating. Famous quote from Propellerheads sung by, what's her name, Shirley Bassey. But here we are again going into our anchorage with lots of clouds around us, storms, squalls, you name it, rolling swell, although it's not quite so bad. I thought it was going to be worse. Got about an hour to go and we will arrive at today's anchorage and we'll find out if it's going to be suitable, because the swell is coming from the northwest and there isn't much room to get some shelter, but we're going to give it a go.
So we've just had a little bit of rain just as we've entered into the bay, and that's the island we're going to head over to now. There's a little reef that sticks out, hopefully to give us a bit of protection from this sort of northwesterly swell that we're getting. And well, it's basically suck it and see. We'll just get in there and see what it's like. But I think, as Liz had said, surrounded by rain cloud, rain cloud, rain cloud, rain cloud, rain cloud. We had a bit of wind come through as well, and actually that came from the west, yes, where the really strong winds come from, but which could present a problem if we're at anchor here actually, but anyway, we'll just see how it goes, innit?
It's a transition, isn't it?
Transition, yeah, transitional. Well, that's just typical, isn't it? We arrived in the pissing, pouring rain and wind, and just as Liz got the snubber on and we turned the engine off, it's cleared up. What's that all about?
Sod's law.
Yes. Another beautiful little anchorage,
Yeah.
tucked in behind an island. There's a little spit coming out of the bottom of the island there with a couple of spider boats at anchor. All the little boats are at anchor because of that squall that just came through. And then just down in the corner there are some stilted houses, and they're proper stilted houses because about 2/3 of them are just stilts. A 3-storey house, 1 storey on top of 2 stories worth of stilts. Getting ready for global warming.
Finding safe anchorages along the northern Sulawesi coastline is difficult, but not impossible. In fact, as we were discovering, there is safe anchorage from squalls every 30 to 50 miles or so. The marked anchorages on our charts were from sailors who had travelled in the northeast monsoon, but look hard and you'll find enough nooks and crannies to protect you from those horrible southwesterly squalls. We were about to find out that the bad weather doesn't end there though, as we continued eastwards.